Hello, Exiles. This is probably going to be my first and last ever reaction video, but this is about a very special announcement near and dear to our hearts. If you don't know what it is, it's a message to Path of Exile 1 players. And I come a little prepared. It's not just a reaction, this is more so, I don't know. It's hard to label this. Is it doomsaying? Is it complete, is it a tantrum on my part? Is it constructive criticism? It's a little bit of all of it. I think we're all feeling that way right now after hearing this. But let's get started and let the conversation speak for itself, because there's a lot to say about what comes up in this, and I have a lot of things to say about it that I imagine aren't maybe being said elsewhere. Some saucier takes that maybe a bigger creator doesn't want to make themselves. So let's start with Jonathan,
Let's talk about PoE 1.
who's talking about that.
Now, when we announced PoE 2, we promised that we would continue to create PoE 1 expansions, and we do intend to keep that promise. But it's certainly been a lot harder to deliver on it than what we expected.
How many people who paid for Path of Exile 2 early access maybe would have decided not to if they knew what they were doing behind the scenes? You might not answer that question the way you think you would because you haven't heard what they're doing behind the scenes, but he's going to get to that in a moment, so I'll let the man talk.
Now, the trouble really started after Settlers of Calgar in July last year. The ideal time to have released 326 would have been late October, before the originally scheduled release of PoE 2's early access. But we just didn't think we could do it. It was too close to the huge circus that was the organisation around PoE 2's launch. But we also didn't want to immediately launch it right after PoE 2 either, so that kind of ruled out December. So then we're thinking, okay, we can't really have a launch in January due to Christmas, so we're really going to have to do it in February. And this wasn't great. It would mean 7 months with no leagues. But we really didn't think it was possible to do it any earlier than that.
I just want to say, I highly suspect that Jonathan is full of shit right now. He lays out a very rational timeline of why things are the way they are, but to me, this kind of plays like a liar over explaining their lie, with like just, really doubling down on everything that's going on. Why would they feel that way so strongly? This is a little hard for me to say myself because he hasn't gotten to the part where they talk about how the October launch was obviously pushed back, but they knew at that point already that it was going to be pushed back, is my point here. And it feels an awful lot like maybe the release scheduling and the way they pushed back the PoE 1 3.26 league so far for PoE 2, like already it was supposed to be for February, right? And now that's, well, you'll find out in a moment if you don't know. And now they're trying to say all of this. And it is my personal conclusion here that they knew they were going to need all this time. So in reality, the whole October release date was already screwed, basically because why would they set this up giving them so much time if they weren't anticipating that Path of Exile 1's 3.26 league was going to get in the way of Path of Exile 2's development on a much greater scale than they've let on so far. It's basically, looking at this all, it looks like this was way more planned out than they let on in this video. And I want you to keep that in mind as we go forward, because this is not a great look for them.
And we didn't really announce this exactly, but it was certainly something that we had said to quite a few people over time, so the community became generally aware that that was our plan. The issue is this: PoE 2's endgame needed a lot of work. Having the guys on the PoE 1 team help out for 3 months on PoE 2, given that 326 was 7 months away, seemed like a no-brainer, and man did PoE 2 need it. The problem is we got to the middle of October, and PoE 2's launch was imminent, and I'll tell you what, taking people off PoE 2 at that point was just impossible. The endgame was not in a shippable state.
It was possible. You chose to sacrifice Path of Exile 1's 3.26 release for Path of Exile 2. Don't lie. Don't tell us that it was impossible. That's an emotional justification. That's not an objective one.
But you know what? We could still do it. If the PoE 1 team just kept helping until PoE 2 shipped in late November, we could still do it. Maybe the scope would need to decrease a little bit, but mid-February was still possible. We just needed to ship this damn game first, get it out of the way. We literally couldn't think about anything else until it was done.
Jonathan couldn't think about anything else. And I think Jonathan definitely sold people on the idea that Path of Exile 2 is the future of grinding gear games. However, Path of Exile 1 is the present of grinding gear games. All of the money coming into the company is because of Path of Exile 1. You might think Path of Exile 2 did really well, but I'll bring up again, how do you think the changes to sales for early access would have gone if people knew Path of Exile 1 was suffering like this in the background?
But we still had time. The problem is, we were fooling ourselves. PoE 2 was delayed 3 weeks, making the problem even worse. And then after the game was released, well, of course we had to immediately deal with all the problems. How could we think about making a PoE 1 expansion when we still have hundreds of thousands of people who are having bad experiences in PoE 2? There are crashes, there are severe in-game balance problems. How could I justify taking some of the most experienced developers we have off PoE 2 when it's on fire?
Where are the fixes, Jonathan? If there were constant fixes coming in, because this is an early access game, this is not a release game, you don't have to do the normal release schedule. This argument would honestly be a lot easier to deal with and honestly accept. But we don't see new classes, we don't see new skills, we don't see unreleased support gems. We don't see very many endgame improvements at all. We've seen a very small handful that were well received. But now they want to postpone everything until the big, 0.2 release. Why are we doing that? Why are we waiting for a major release when your primary income generating game is stagnating in the background? That doesn't make any sense. You could be making constant changes right now, right? And still building towards a big 0.2 release. But you could be working on the things that need to be done immediately, much more aggressively with a smaller group of people. You don't need everyone working on a big new content update like this is going to be the new league, because guess what? It's not. A lot of people do not want to come back for Path of Exile 2 until they've been able to go back to Path of Exile 1. I think this is maybe where they're completely missing the point of how things are going, because Path of Exile 2 is not that well received a game. You're probably thinking, oh, it's the greatest game ever. Have you played Path of Exile 1? And if the answer is yes, I would like to ask you a question, and I'm going to ask it by having someone else who feels the same way ask it. And this was kind of nice to see it echoed by someone else. I would have been happy if anyone echoed it. The fact that it was this guy really, really seems to help my argument a little bit, though.
I don't understand why PoE2 exists. That's Ben.
This is his video, The Ups and Downs of PoE2. We're not going to watch the whole thing, don't worry. But he basically goes very in-depth about how the best part of Path of Exile 2 is its campaign, and largely the endgame and much of what else is done in Path of Exile 2, aside from maybe the general structure of the gem system, I believe was like his one other big thing that he was very, very positive and upbeat about. He was talking about how it didn't entirely make sense that this was an entirely new game because so much of it was a step backward. And that's a sentiment echoed by so many people. And it really kind of sells his position that this was recorded candidly on a live stream by him while he is playing Path of Exile 1. This video was released 2 days ago. Probably one of the most prolific players of the entire game is not playing the game right now. Or rather, he is not playing the sequel right now that they are focusing on. He's playing this, even though we know we're not getting anything new for a very long time. And honestly, I think it is more likely, even if 0.2 or 0.0. Whatever it is, 0.2 comes out, that I will go back to Path of Exile 1 first. I think Pox is doing like a private league soon. I think that's actually releasing tomorrow. Assuming I get this out immediately, which I probably will. But yeah, on the 31st of January, Pox is doing a private kind of refresh for Settlers. And honestly, I might play it somewhat, because I want to play Path of Exile 1 really badly, and I'm finding out we're not getting that. Anyway. The general point here with Jonathan's whole argument about how they just have to get it out, they can't pull people off, Path of Exile 2, Path of Exile 2. Path of Exile 2 is not that important. You are being absurd and ridiculous with these assertions. No one agrees with this who actually stops to think about it. Because people who have actually played the game, both games specifically, but people who have actually played the game know it needs work. All right, I'm considered kind of optimistic apparently when I say in a year, Path of Exile 2 might be a game that doesn't need Path of Exile 1 anymore. A lot of other people say 2 or 3 years. And you know what? They're probably right. It's going to take a long time before this game does what it does. Anyway, let's let Jonathan continue to explain why this has to be this way.
Now, after the Christmas break, we had to really admit something to ourselves. The most urgent priority was getting PoE 2 to a point where it didn't have major issues. And it's hard to even think about what PoE 1 needs when PoE 2 has really obvious problems that need fixing. We needed to get it to the point of stability and balance, and to fix the most severe deficiencies that PoE 2 has before we can take our eyes off it. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we can't really work on PoE 1 3.26 until PoE 2 0.2.0 has shipped. And then being honest, we probably need to support that for a couple of weeks after that as well. Now in the meantime, we are going to get a bunch of pre-production done on 3.26 with whatever people who are not needed to fix issues with PoE 2. And once 0.2.0 is sorted, I promise we will devote as many resources as are needed from our company to get 3.26 done as soon as possible. Unfortunately, I just can't promise a date right now. Now I'm really sorry for how this went down. Honestly, I should have predicted the fact that taking the PoE 1 team off PoE 1 would lead to this.
I'm going to stop him there because he's kind of moving into another topic. I get the feeling this is another lie happening right in our faces. There is no pre-production happening. They have things they could be doing right now for the benefit of Path of Exile 1. They could have events scheduled. They could start a new ladder themselves. Just like they did with the, Necro Settlers, right? We already got that. Why not something else along those? Why not Scourge Settlers or Sentinel that's hard. Sentinel Settlers. That's harder to say than you would think, especially after saying Scourge Settlers. Where is this stuff, Jonathan? Like, what are we doing here? Where is the content that you have very meticulously designed to push us forward? So I have to conject, why are they not doing that? Oh, it's because they're saving it. They're saving it so they have something to give us when it turns out 3.26 is already planned to be even later than they're implied when we don't have a date. I think 3.26 probably maybe barely by the end of this year. I don't think we're even like remotely close. It's this is their priorities are kind of, I mean, they're showing us their priorities right now. And I almost feel like this video is vaguely worded in such a way to get people comfortable with that while making assumptions that will slowly erode as time goes on. And people will just say, oh, well, if you thought that, then you were just dumb the whole time. Of course they meant this the whole time. No, I'm saying right now, absolutely, these guys are not doing anything they should be, because again, it does not take a lot of people to do this stuff. All right, Dark Shrine. You remember Dark Shrine? Chris Wilson, as one person, coded Dark Shrine in a week.
It's impossible. Tony Stark was able to build this in a cave with a box of scraps.
A Dark Shrine type thing for settlers would be great. We don't need a lot. We need an excuse. I mean, how hard is it to get someone to look at numbers and look at the least performing skills and be like, all right, we can bump them up a little bit, and we'll put a disclaimer that says these changes might be reverted in 3.26. That's enough with a fresh economy start. We're pretty low maintenance audience, but they don't want that. They want people on Path of Exile 2. That's kind of the crux of this. They're not supporting Path of Exile 1 because they do not want people playing Path of Exile 1. They want people playing Path of Exile 2 so that they can get more development information and they can keep working on their baby. And I don't understand why they are so gung-ho. Maybe they're just sick of working on Path of Exile 1, but generally to me it really feels like this is the saucy take I was getting to. I think this is Jonathan's fault. There's something rather telling that Chris Wilson is not here to give this message. You know that? Chris Wilson has always been the face of the company and the guy who will come out and say things so that blame is deflected to him. When Chris Wilson does not come out to give this message, I get the feeling Chris Wilson has either stepped back this far because he is dejected from the company personally, or on the verge of retiring, or Chris Wilson doesn't agree. That's my other theory right now, is Chris Wilson is like, yeah, if you want to do that, you do that. You're the director. You guys are going to do what you're going to do. But I don't really agree with this. And I almost feel like that's what's happening. And that's That's throwing some gasoline on a potential fire, which I don't particularly love doing. But this is them trying to appeal to us emotionally. There is not much logic here. We don't have events. They're making claims that are trying to set expectations, but they're not giving us anything specific. Almost, and the points, at least from my perspective, all point to it because we're not going to get what is implied. It's going to be much longer wait than that. Anyway, there's a little bit of video left. I should let it run.
Outcome. And I probably should have resisted doing it. But at every stage, I just kept thinking, we still have time. We still have time. And then we didn't have time anymore. Now, we still have a lot to learn about how to run 2 games simultaneously. We were overconfident. We still need to work out how to structure our studio to make this possible. But we do have a solid plan for what we want to do with 326. Obviously, I can't talk about it yet, but I'm hoping you guys are going to love it. I really want to thank you guys for all your support over the years. You guys do deserve better than this, and we will get 326 out as fast as we can.
That ending does not feel good. I'd say this is probably the most difficult part is what he says there at the end there. Not that you deserve better than this part. That is well intentioned and I'd say emotionally savvy of him to say, which is good. I appreciate that. Let's come back here real quick.
Now, we still have a lot to learn about how to run 2 games simultaneously. We were overconfident. We still need to work out how to structure our studio to make this possible.
And if you can't figure it out, Jonathan, what are the odds that you just pull the plug on Poe 1 and sunset the game? I think that's everyone's question right now. Because at the end here, you don't say you're committed to updating Poe 1 for any duration of time. You just say for 3.26. Almost like 3.26 is going to be the final update. Like the final proper update. That is my perspective on this, at least. This is a rather grim sign off, and it's the only thing that has any sort of a concrete. You got to look for the absolute details where they exist, and the only absolute detail we're getting is that we are getting 3.26 at some point. It's not a good sign, and my financial support is tied to Path of Exile 1. You might not feel that way, but like I said, Path of Exile 2 is not going to be a game that's good enough for years. A year, if they're lucky and they work really hard. And if they pull all the people from Poe 1, I don't even think that's going to help expedite it, right? I don't think that means, oh, well, it's going to definitely happen. No, I really don't think that. A tremendously disappointing time for Path of Exile, but I think a more disappointing time for Grinding Gear Games as a whole. This is an unwise decision on their part. And I feel like the video that was released here is tone deaf and intended to capitalize on a perceived hype for Path of Exile 2 that isn't really there. All right, there's a lot of people in the community, not just Ben. I don't want to like saddle him as saying things that he hasn't, but Path of Exile 2 really is a game that is going to take a lot of work to get into a good place. Path of Exile 1 is the greatest ARPG of all time. It's also paying the bills. And what I'm saying now, both to GGG and I guess to other players who are frustrated, is that's how it is. I will not be spending money on Path of Exile 2 until Path of Exile 1 is improved in some way or given the respect it deserves, at least for the time that it is going to have to continue to carry the company. And I hope other people will continue to join me on that. And I hope GGG sees community feedback and realizes, oh, we are far too aggressive on Path of Exile 2 right now. It's not strong enough for this kind of treatment, because that is the situation right now. This game is not going to do what they think it is for a long time yet. Yeah, that's all. I don't particularly agree with this video. In fact, the existence of it is kind of frustrating, and I would even go so far as to say it's a little Blizzard-like. This is tone deaf, addressing the things they want to say and trying to take the community concerns and sweep them under the rug, where they will fester and create a wound. This is where the goodwill goes to die. Or they could reverse course and realize things are dumb and set some people aside to do events and stuff in the meanwhile and very quickly right the ship. We're nowhere near like I shouldn't say nowhere near. We're like in a boat that's heading towards a waterfall, but there's like tons of time. There's tons of time to steer off to the side or just turn it around. And they're like, no, it's fine. Let's go over the cliff. I really hope that's not what they do. They need to change a little something because this is not acceptable. All right, that's it. This is not acceptable. That's the title of the video. Have a good one, Exiles.